Hi, my name is Trevor Bates, and I am going to inform you about the background, the history, and the long-term effects of the Iran hostage crisis. So, what was the Iran hostage crisis, and why is it important to you? Well, the Iran hostage crisis was a diplomatic standoff between the United States and Iran that lasted from November 1979 to January 1981, involving 66 hostages. It is important because it sets major groundwork for United States foreign relations in the Middle East and how they handle hostage crises. So let's start with some background. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, the United States and Great Britain owned 75 to 80% of Iran's oil reserves. Even with this big role in Iran, though, according to Elaine Kamarck, the American public had little knowledge of Iran, the Shah, Islam, or their culture. That would all change soon enough. The source of tension between Iran and the US stemmed from an increasingly intense conflict over oil. British and Americans owned the bulk of Iran's oil preserves, and Iran wanted them back. So, in 1951, a European educated nationalist named Mohammad Mossadegh is democratically elected as Iran's prime minister. He announces a plan to nationalize the country's oil industry. In response to these policies, the American CIA and the British intelligence service devised a secret plan to overthrow Mossadegh. So in August 1953, Mossadegh is disposed of, and the new leader was a member of Iran's royal family named Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. The Shah's government was secular, anti-communist, and pro-Western, all things America liked. In exchange for tens of millions of dollars in foreign aid, he returned 80% of Iran's oil reserves to the Americans and the British. Flash forward to the 1970s, the Iranians are fed up with the Shah's government. According to the White House Historical Association, the Shah was reaping the harvest of years of brutal and unpopular policies, including the use of secret police that controlled dissent with arbitrary arrests and torture. In protest, these Iranians turned to the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a radical Islamist who fought for autonomy for the Iranians. In July of 1979, the revolutionaries backed by the Ayatollah forced the Shah to disband his government and flee to Egypt. The Ayatollah installed a militant Islamist government in his place. Later that year, while the Shah is in Egypt, he becomes sick with malignant lymphoma. He wants to be treated in New York because New York is where the world's best medical facilities are. So in October 1979, President Carter reluctantly agrees to allow the exiled leader to enter the U.S. for treatment. He understands that if he allows this leader in, he may lose all his reach on oil in the Middle East. So just days after the Shah arrives in New York, on November 4th, 1979, a group of pro-Ayatollah soldiers smashes the gates and scales the walls of the American embassy in Tehran, Iran. Here's a picture of the pro-Ayatollah soldiers smashing the walls, and they take 66 Americans hostage. After a short period of time, they release 13 and then later a 14th hostage that develops health problems. So by April of 1980, 52 hostages remain in the embassy compound. Now, while they are never seriously physically injured, they were subject to a rich variety of demeaning and ridiculing treatment. They were blindfolded through parades, thrown into crowds. They were not allowed to speak or read, and they were rarely permitted to change clothes. So throughout the crisis, there was a frightening uncertainty about their fate. The hostages never knew whether they were going to be tortured, murdered, or if they were ever going to make it back to America. So in April of 1980, President Carter decides something has to be done. He plans to launch a risky military rescue mission known as Operation Eagle Claw. The operation was supposed to send an elite rescue team into the embassy compound. However, a severe desert storm on the day of the mission caused several helicopters to malfunction, including one that veered into a large transport plane during takeoff. 8 American servicemen were killed in the accident, and Operation Eagle Claw was later aborted. Here's a picture of the helicopter that crashed into the transport plane. And yes, 8 American servicemen were killed, and Operation Eagle Claw was aborted. So according to Colin Ferrant, there's evidence that after the botched American military rescue operation, the hostages were later separated into 14 different places throughout Iran. So originally they were all held in one place in the embassy, but the Iranians realized that with a successful rescue mission, all of their bargaining chips would be gone. So they separate them out into 14 different places. Now meanwhile, in America, the election of 1980 is coming up. President Carter's inability to resolve this hostage crisis makes him look like a very weak and ineffective leader. Rumors are also circulating that Ronald Reagan's campaign staff is negotiating an arms trade-off with the Iranians, where he will give them American firearms as long as the hostages are not released before the election. Here is a political cartoon of Ronald Reagan and the Ayatollah. He is holding a sign that says, "Arms payoff for hostage release." So, later that year, in November of 1980, Ronald Reagan defeats President Carter in a landslide victory. So, on January 21st of 1981, which is his inauguration day, just a few hours after he delivers his inauguration address, the remaining hostages are set free. They had been in captivity for 444 days. The big summary of this whole situation is that the United States kicks out the democratically elected Mossadegh in 1953 and influences Iran's politics and expects no repercussion. But Iran turns around and influences our election through the hostage crisis, just like we did to them. So even though the hostage crisis was just a 444-day period of disgruntled Iranians taking their anger out on America, you need to realize the enduring effect it will have on America's foreign relations for years to come. Now that we have wrapped up the actual hostage crisis, the long-term effects that we need to learn from this are never ending. So this event caused political and economic relations to change in the Middle East to this day. The United States will never have all its eggs in one basket in the Middle East again. They're spread out through all these different countries that happen to be all fighting each other. And this is the Iran hostage crisis is the first time the U.S. government ever has to deal with Islamic extremists. And this is the first time that they realize the depths that they will go to influence what is going on in America. So this event has caused political and economic relations to change for years to come. Other countries realize that the United States can be swayed. Our elections can be swayed by things like this hostage crisis. So just because the hostage crisis was just this 444-day period of a couple disgruntled Iranians taking their anger out on America, the long-term effects and the long-term foreign relations are forever changed throughout America and throughout the Middle East. So that's all I have on the Iran hostage crisis and the long-term effects of it. Thank you.